At 32 meters or 105 feet in height, North River Falls is the tallest waterfall in Nova Scotia and very possibly the Maritimes. It's a journey of about 9 kilometers from the trailhead, and it's a bucket list hike for many. This is where I'm on my walkabout today. There are warning signs at the beginning of this trail, which is found in a provincial park. This is because some of the bridges were knocked out in a storm a number of years ago and have yet to be fully replaced. In some places there are detours, and in others, river crossings are required to make it all the way. There is a smaller waterfall you can hike to if you're not up for the full day trip required to get in and back from the main waterfall. From the same parking lot, the Little Falls Trail will take you about 1 kilometer to a smaller waterfall. Well, it's quite humid today in the river valley, and so I'm sure I'm probably going to be soaked between little rain showers and the humidity before I even reach the falls. Now, this trail is a combination of fairly easy hiking like this path here and some technical stuff later on. The first part of the trail is called the Settlement Trail, and the second part is called the Falls Trail. I'll be joining an old settlement road once used by Scottish settlers in the early 1800s fairly soon, and that's why this is called the Settlement Trail. There was actually quite a large community here, and near the beginning of this trail, near the trailhead, the remains of a schoolhouse can actually be found. North River was originally called Petit Pierre's Arm by the French. And if you look at the mouth of North River as it enters St. Anne's Harbor, you can imagine it as a small arm. The name was changed to North River by the Scots when they arrived. The very first Scottish family to settle here along the river is believed to have been John MacLeod Mason. He lived near the mouth of the river, which makes some sense as the water was important both for fishing and also for supplies and communication. MacLeod arrived here from Scotland and had 2 sons. Some of the descendants of John MacLeod still live in this very area, not having moved far from the original family farm of 1821. The foundations of some of the old homes can still be found in this area. In the mid-1800s, the Scottish population around St. Anne's Harbor and in North River increased rapidly. The Scottish settlement grew when the flock of Reverend Norman MacLeod arrived from Pictou in 1820. He stayed for about 30 years before heading off to New Zealand. Other settlers came directly from Scotland, with at least 15 families having already settled in the St. Anne's area before MacLeod arrived with his flock. Of course, back in those days, Cape Breton was very remote. St. Anne's may very well have been the other side of the planet from Sydney. Attempts had been made to build passable roads between places like Bedeck and Sydney, but even those were only barely passable, even on horseback. Communication was by water, when it wasn't icebound. As you come along the Settlement Trail portion of this hike, there is evidence of the old farmsteads that would have once been here. Right here is what looks like a pile of rocks, but if you look closely, you can tell this was man-made. This was almost certainly part of one of the farms that once lined this road, the old Scottish settlers. Now, the farms were ultimately abandoned, of course. Their children moved away, families changed, and people just moved closer to the harbor because it made more sense. The roads were there, communication services, all that sort of thing. But as you walk this trail, the evidence of what was once a fairly thriving community in this forest still exists. So a few years ago, there was a heavy rainstorm and some of the trail got washed out. And one of the things that happened was a bridge was destroyed. It has not yet been replaced, but the province has put a detour in place. And this is not one of the safe places to try crossing the river. Up ahead, you can do that, but not right here, so follow the detour. The 12,000 acres of the North River Wilderness Area are protected by the Nova Scotia government. Now, wilderness areas are a particular type of protection, and there are others. Wilderness areas don't allow things like forestry and mining, though existing mineral leases are usually honored until they expire. There are no mineral leases in this wilderness area. This wilderness area includes many unique features, including a pure hemlock stand, which was recognized by the International Biological Program. That program operated from 1964 until 1974 to coordinate large-scale environmental studies. The trees in this area are said to reach as old as 250 years, close to the river itself, longer than any Europeans have had permanent settlements in the North River. This was the site of the former McLean farm. It's long since abandoned now, of course, although there are some foundations that still exist. Cape Breton has never been known as a farming destination. It was very difficult to actually farm here, but if you lived this remotely, then you had to be able to provide for yourself and your community. So farms were a necessity. This area looks almost like riverbed, but you can see by the height of the trees that it's also forest. This is an example of where the water levels got so high that the forest, or at least parts of the forest, were just inundated with water. It's amazing how it's changed the landscape here. This is the North River itself. Now, it flows down towards St. Anne's Harbor, comes out very close to Goose Cove. The falls themselves are actually on the east branch of the North River, which is at the far top end of the North River Wilderness area. The East Branch itself flows out of the East Branch Lakes further up in the highlands. This is the end of North River proper, and here it splits off into some tributaries, the West Branch of the North River and the Middle Branch. And a few hundred meters up the Middle Branch, it splits off again to the East Branch, and that's where the falls are. And it's at the East Branch that I'll be after the break.
Won't you be mine? Feel the sunshine.
Well, I'm on the North River Falls Trail in search of the tallest waterfall in all of Nova Scotia. I've come well past the halfway point now, and I'm following the East Branch of the North River. And in this area, at one time, there were logging camps. And logging was important, even if it wasn't a big industry here, because of course, timber was needed in order to build homes, farms, even boats. Being next to the river was also important because it provided not only a source of drinking water, but a way to move logs downstream to where they would be used. Well, the power of this river means that the trail is changing all the time. And at the moment, a lot of it's washed out. So river crossings it is. This area sits in an eco-district called the Cape Breton Hills, and it borders another eco-district called the Cape Breton Highlands, which if I went beyond the falls, I would actually reach. Now, eco-districts are not like properties. They don't have distinct boundaries. They don't have survey markers. Instead, they're more an indication of the types of plants and animals, and even the geology that's found in a certain area. The Cape Breton Hills Eco-District is also not a designation of land ownership or use. In 2007, 50% of the land in the Cape Breton Hills was privately held, 35% was provincially owned, and the rest held by either the federal government or nonprofits and community organizations. So what's happened over the past few years along the North River Trail is this cliff has been eroded away. And the trail, which was well out there, is now gone. Then you can see there's places another trail was constructed and then trees have fallen over. And so there are now sections of this trail which are very technical in nature. And you want things like hiking poles and sometimes even ropes. Coming out on this hike, I knew that there would be stream crossings, so I did pack some water shoes, but I honestly didn't expect it to be quite this bad. And as I said before, it can be really variable. And this upper trail at North River Falls has changed substantially. So if you're gonna do it, really come prepared. Fortunately, our director of photography suggested we bring a rope. And I laughed at the time, but the rope is now being used. So the crew is holding it, and we've been slowly getting the camera equipment across to the other side. I hear North River Falls is worth it when you get to the end. I hear it's quite lovely, so. And this is Morgan, our first camera assistant, and they are very strong, and I'm very thankful for that. Well, I've made it to the intersection of the east branch of the North River and John McLeod Brook. John McLeod Brook is coming down a bit like a waterfall right now, so it's very impressive. That brook takes me back to the stories of the original Scottish settlers. You may recall that I mentioned that the very first Scottish settler in North River is believed to have been John McLeod, and it's very likely that that brook was named for him. So one species that I've seen quite a lot of as I've moved up the river valley is the Canadian tiger swallowtail butterfly. It's an absolutely beautiful butterfly with yellow wings and striking black lines on those wings. They're only seasonal here. They come the end of June, beginning of July as part of their migration pattern. And that's very common in river valleys to see different plants and animals that will appear at specific times of the year. In addition to the yellow butterflies, there are also jet black females, but they are exceptionally rare. The females lay their eggs one at a time on plant leaves. The caterpillars then eat the leaves as they grow. Swallowtails are found from central Alaska all the way to the southern Maritimes and northern New England. As caterpillars, they prefer birch, aspen, and black cherry. But as they turn into a butterfly, their tastes change to the nectar of flowers. Another interesting species in this area is the Bicknell's thrush, and it's a very small bird that was first discovered in 1882, but was only recognized as an independent species in 1995. It's got a very small habitat, New England, Quebec, and right here in Nova Scotia. 3% of the population of that bird lives in this province. Well, I was told by what turns out to be a very unreliable source that there would be 2 river crossings I would have to navigate where bridges were out. By my count, this is at least 5. I'm going to see if I can do this one without falling in or getting wet. And I'm not successful. This is North River Falls, and it's absolutely stunning. As I said, the tallest waterfall in all of Nova Scotia and maybe the Maritimes. But the thing is, this isn't all of it. And for me to see the whole thing, I'm gonna have to go up yet one more trail and find a look-off.
Come on, won't you be mine? Come on.
I am not gonna lie, that was a very difficult hike. Far more difficult than I imagined. There's been a lot more damage to the trail, a lot more washouts, a lot more debris has gone down. but it was so worth it. No wonder it's a bucket list hike for so many people. I mean, to see that waterfall, to say that you have been to the tallest waterfall in Nova Scotia and perhaps the Maritimes, that is certainly worth it. You can never see too many waterfalls. So after the break, I'm headed to yet another Cape Breton masterpiece.
Feel the sunshine.
When it comes to waterfalls, you really can't see too many. And if you're in Cape Breton, there are just so many to choose from that you could spend the entire summer going from waterfall to waterfall. Now, near Wagmacook First Nation on the Bredor Lakes is the Humes River Wilderness Area. And it's here, in search of the Humes River Falls, that I'm on my walkabout today. I started my hike behind the community school. Wagmacook is one of the 5 Mi'kmaq First Nations located in Cape Breton and is the oldest permanent settlement for the Mi'kmaq Nation in Nova Scotia. Around 700 people live there. So this is kind of cool. We often think of beaver dams as being destructive, but they're obviously an important part of the ecosystem, and this is quite a large one, and you can see that fairly recently, the beaver has taken down yet another tree to expand their empire here. If you use some of the popular mapping software to drive from Bedeque to Lake Ainslie or Marguerite, it will occasionally suggest using this route. Now, there are very few vehicles that are going to make it down this road these days, although you will make it, because the trails go on and continue on to those places. This beautiful spot, this is Macquarie's Brook. So you may wonder where the Humes River Wilderness gets its name. Now, more than likely, it's from a family name, although, to be frank, the origin is a little murky. There are a lot of Humes in this area going all the way up to Bedeque, and that name can be traced back to at least 1822. Now, in the 1800s, early 1900s, people had a habit of naming mountains and rivers and that sort of thing after their families, especially if they had farms or homesteads in the area. And that's probably the source of the name here. About 2.5 kilometers that way would take me down to the St. Patrick's Channel and the Trans-Canada Highway. Going up this way will take me to the falls, and there's some pretty good signage that's been put in place, and this has been put in place by the Wagmacook First Nation. Well, I have traveled more or less 3 kilometers to get to here, which is the intersection for the Humes River Falls. And this is where the most interesting part of the hike starts. It'll take me into the falls, and it will take me into the Humes River Wilderness Area. It's been mostly uphill getting here, and if I continued on this trail, I would actually get to see the McNaughton Falls, but that's not on my agenda today. There is much more up and down to come on my way to the Humes River Falls. This foundation here is the last remnants of the homes that the original Scottish settlers lived in these woods. Humes River flows down to St. Patrick's Channel on the Bredor Lakes. It's an extension of one of the areas settled by Scottish immigrants around 1829. There wasn't a lot of major farming in this area, but it was a popular place for timber, which would be collected on ships, mostly from the UK, and sent across the ocean. This trail in the wilderness area is actually really nice to walk on, but officially it doesn't exist. And I say officially because when you look at the list on the Nova Scotia government's website of wilderness areas, this is not one of the areas that actually has a trail network. And I think that probably really just comes down to a definition of maintained. This trail is maintained by the Wagmacook First Nation, but it doesn't have an official trail agreement with the province. Nonetheless, anybody coming out to the waterfall is appreciative of all the people who are involved in making this route passable. So this is another spot in the wilderness area where you can turn off to the McNaughton Falls. There is a trail there and it is flagged with tape, but it's not all that well used, and so it isn't terribly well maintained at the moment. But if you're into some bushwhacking, you can head straight that way. I'm continuing on to the Humes Falls. Well, the waterfall I am in search of is called the Humes River Waterfall, but it's not actually on Humes River, and this trail doesn't go by Humes River proper. This is the first branch, Humes River, and the waterfall is on the second branch of the Humes River, and they're both tributaries. Now, all of those tributaries actually flow out of a gorge carved out of the highlands. The Humes River Wilderness Area covers almost 9,000 acres and is part of the Cape Breton Highlands Eco District and the Keppoch Mountain Natural Landscape. It's home to 3 species of rare bull and shrew, as well as the endangered American marten and lynx. With only about 100 meters or so to go before the river, you can already hear it. Well, here it is, Humes River Falls, dropping 60 feet to the pool at the bottom. Now, it's said that that pool is a beautiful place to go for a swim sometimes, especially on a hot summer's day. And you know, while this is becoming an increasingly popular spot, it's still not all that well known, so you can still find some solitude here. There's something magical about waterfalls. It doesn't seem to matter how difficult they are to find or how hard they are to get to. People will always find a way. As Virginia Allison once wrote, there's a waterfall in every dream, cool and crystal clear. It falls gently on the sleeper, soothing the mind and cleansing the soul. Wherever your next walkabout takes you, I hope it's an experience that soothes your soul.
Hey, come on, feel the sunshine.